In a flashback to 1987, we see Hank Pym and his wife Janet van Dyne set to go on a mission, leaving their young daughter Hope in the care of their housekeeper. As Ant-Man and the Wasp, they shrink themselves to stop a Soviet nuclear missile from detonating inside American territory. Finding that they can't shrink small enough to slip between the steel plates, Janet goes subatomic to drop the missile into the ocean, but it left her lost in the quantum realm, and she was presumed dead. However, after Scott Lang, as the new Ant-Man, went subatomic and managed to return to normal size, Hank tells Hope that there might be a way to bring Janet back. In the present day, Scott has been under house arrest after violating the Sokovia Accords by working with Captain America in Stuttgart. He is spending his day with Cassie, who is visiting him for the day. Scott has a whole area set up with the help of Luis in his house for them to play in, including a slide that goes out the door. Unfortunately, Scott's foot breaks through the fence and therefore the perimeter, and the FBI pays him a visit. Agent Jimmy Woo leads the inspection to make sure Scott isn't doing anything suspicious. Scott explains that he's had to get creative to entertain Cassie, including doing sleight of hand magic, which impresses Woo. The FBI leaves, and Cassie goes home with Maggie and Paxton. With only 3 days left under house arrest, Scott does what he can to keep himself occupied. He takes a bath and then has a dream where he finds himself as Janet playing hide and seek with a young Hope. Scott later gives Hank a call, despite both he and Hope not having spoken to him since his arrest. He tells Hank about the dream he saw. Hours later, Scott is tranquilized by something flying in the room. Scott wakes up to find Hope driving him somewhere in a shrunken van. She lets him know that she took off his ankle bracelet and put it on the giant ant Scott has living with him. They arrive at the lab where they show Scott that they have created a tunnel to the quantum realm in the hopes of bringing Janet back. After Scott describes his dream in full detail, Hank and Hope deduce that he and Janet are connected because of the time he spent in the quantum realm. They are missing a key electronic component to get the tunnel to work, so they head to meet with someone who possesses it. Hank shrinks the lab and takes it with him. However, they don't realize they are being watched by a transparent figure. The three arrive at a restaurant where Hope meets with Sonny Birch, a black market tech dealer, while Scott and Hank monitor the situation from inside the van. Birch knows Hope is Susan, but he has already figured out her identity by the time she arrives. Birch refuses to give up the component that Hope needs, so she appears to leave. Birch and his goons start to walk out, but they are knocked around by Hope in her Wasp suit. Scott is impressed to see that she has wings and blasters. She fights them in the restaurant's kitchen and manages to enlarge a salt shaker to knock out one goon while also running across knives being thrown at her. As Hope grabs the component, she is attacked by the figure from earlier, Ghost. She is able to phase through anything, which means Hope's punches are useless against her. Scott joins Hope as Ant-Man in a new suit to help her, but Ghost escapes and makes her way to the van, and steals the lab from Hank. Scott brings Hope and Hank to hide at X-Con, the security company run by Luis, with Dave and Kurt as his employees. There, they try to come up with a plan to get the lab back. Hank figures that he has to reluctantly seek help from a former friend and partner of his, Bill Foster. Ghost, whose real name is Ava Starr, goes to her home. She phases involuntarily and must sleep inside a special chamber to control it. Scott, Hope, and Hank go in disguise to the university that Bill teaches at. He maintains a grudge with Hank over the work they did together decades earlier in which Bill reached 21 feet. Scott then sees Woo and his fellow agents outside, thinking they know he's in there. Before they go, Bill tells them that they can locate the lab by modifying a diffractor on one of the suit's regulators. Hank says they can't use the new Ant-Man suit because it's a work in progress, so Scott tells them they can find it in the older suit, which is in a trophy that Cassie took to school for show and tell. Scott and Hope sneak into Cassie's school, but the regulator on Scott's suit malfunctions, making him the size of a child. They get to Cassie's classroom and get the suit out of the trophy before they are spotted. The trio locate Ava's home and find the lab, but she knocks all three of them out and has them tied up. She reveals she is working with Bill, who took her in as a child. Her father, Elias Starr, had attempted an experiment to reach the quantum realm, but his own tunnel became unstable. His wife Catherine tried to escape with young Ava, but the little girl ran back for her father. The tunnel caused a huge explosion, killing Elias and Catherine, but Ava survived and her molecules destabilized, resulting in her uncontrolled phasing. She and Bill now plan to use Janet's quantum energy to help turn Ava normal, even if it might kill Janet. Hank fakes having a heart attack to get Bill to grab a tin of Altoids for his meds, which really contain Hank's trained ants that grow to a large size and help free them, allowing the three to escape and take the lab back. After enlarging the lab, Janet takes control of Scott's mind, revealing to Hope and Hank a new algorithm that will help them stabilize the tunnel and enter the coordinates to locate her, but she warns them that they only have 2 hours before the quantum realm becomes so unstable they won't be able to reach her for another century. Birch and his goons go to ex-con and interrogate Louise, Dave, and Kurt using a truth serum, though the villains insist that's not what it is.
Now, Usman is a master at extracting information from the unwilling through psychoactive means. Oh, is that truth serum?
There's no such thing as truth serum. That's just nonsense from TV.
Louise reveals that Scott is with Hope and Hank in the woods where they set up the lab. Ava appears after having heard this information, and she takes out the wheels on Birch's van as she heads to find the heroes herself. Birch then contacts the crooked FBI agent Stoltz and tells him where Scott will be. Stoltz tells Wu, and Louise quickly warns Scott so that he can return home before he is caught escaping his house arrest. Scott informs Hank and Hope that FBI knows their location, and are on the way. Both are furious on Scott for telling their location to Louise, because they have less time to rescue Hope's mother. Scott returns to his home on time before FBI agent arrive. Cassie helps Scott and saves some time for him before Dave reaches to check him. Cassie is with him and says he could use a partner to help him, meaning herself, but Scott says he is Hope, which Cassie thinks is also a good fit. Hope and Hank are caught by FBI agents once they shrink the lab. Stoltz grabs it, but he is knocked out by Ava, who then takes the lab herself. Scott uses the trained ants to help Hope and Hank break out of the FBI headquarters. The ants guide the three to the lab's location, and Louise joins them as backup. Hank uses the giant ants to get Bill out so that he can use his old suit to go into the quantum realm and find Janet. The lab is shrunken again, and Louise grabs it. Scott, as Ant-Man, is attacked by Ava, but he holds her off long enough for Hope and Louise to get away. Scott flies away on a flying ant to meet up with Hope and Louise at the rendezvous point, but they are followed by Birch and his men, as well as Ava. Hope shrinks and enlarges the van to literally throw the goons off, even enlarging a Hello Kitty Pez dispenser to throw at one of them. Scott grows to Giant Man to stop them, but as Ava intervenes, Hope becomes the Wasp to fight her. Birch takes the lab and runs to the docks where he boards a ship to get away. Scott grows again to reach him and stop him to recover the lab. Louise shows up in another car to meet with them, but Scott gets lightheaded from being so huge that he falls into the water. Hope swims down to save him. In the quantum realm, Hank nearly loses his signal, but he finally manages to locate Janet at her coordinates, and they tearfully reunite with a kiss. Meanwhile, the lab has returned to its normal size, and Ava and Bill are planning to extract Janet's quantum energy. Hank and Janet start to return as Ava and Bill begin the process, which starts to drain Janet. Scott and Hope show up and disable their machine, giving Hank and Janet enough time to come out of the quantum realm. Hope reunites with her mother at last. Janet then sees Ava's condition, and she puts her hands on Ava to stabilize her and stop her phasing. Everyone leaves as the heroes take the lab. Bill wants to keep protecting Ava, but she tells him they need to split up. Outside the lab, Dave and Kurt help Louise incapacitate Birch and his goons before injecting them with truth serum as the cops arrive, leading to their arrest. Birch and his goons admit to everything. Wu thinks he knows Scott is out on the streets as Ant-Man, but he goes to his home and finds Scott there. Scott's sentence is finally over, and he is a free man once more. The first thing he does is go see Cassie. In the final scene, Louise gets a new, wealthy client for his business to keep them from going under. Hank brings Janet to the beach where they set up a new house that he expands to its original size. Scott shrinks himself, Hope, and Cassie in a car so they can use a laptop as a screen like a drive-in movie. They are then bothered by a large butterfly. In mid-credit scene, Hank and Janet have set up the quantum tunnel in a van on a rooftop with Hope's help so that Scott can enter it. He obtains quantum energy to keep helping Ava be stabilized. Just as Scott is ready to be brought back, he hears a radio static and doesn't hear anyone on the other end. Back in the real world, Hank, Janet, and Hope have all been turned to dust by Thanos snapping his fingers.